Namaskar, Nilesh Oak here, Jai Siya Ram. Today's subject or today's topic for discussion is literary traditions about Ramayana in Europe. What I am going to discuss is slightly different but related to Europe, but not about the literary traditions, but rather the little that we know from Valmiki Ramayana of India's interaction with Europe at the time of Ramayana. And based on my research, I have shown that Valmiki Ramayana, or the events described in Valmiki Ramayana from different disciplines of science, they take us to 14,000 years ago. Now, when it comes to Vanara parties searching for Sita in 4 different directions, what Sugriva does is he divides the Vanara search parties in 4 different groups and sends them in 4 different directions from India to Arctic. So we are going to specifically look at the north and the west direction because that's what corresponds to modern times Europe. So let's look at in the west direction. Sushena is the head of the Vanara search party in the west direction. These are some of the specific references from Kishkinda Kanda describing the western region. I will do this with the help of the modern day geography map. If you notice the red color that you see, starting with India and going in the north direction, or rather northwest direction, all that red stuff that you see is mountain or mountain ranges. And of course, the blue is the ocean. Now, against this context, let's look at what different areas are described. Naturally, it is describing, starting with the central India, it is describing modern day Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran, Iraq, Turkey, all right? But it's going even beyond all the way to Alps. Many mountain ranges are named with the names that were familiar in those times, such as Pariyatra, Vajra, Chakravan, Varaha, Megha. Another huge mountain range is described without giving a specific name, Meru and Mount Astam Giri. And the mountain Meru is described twice, one in the sense of possibly the North Pole, but another time Valmiki Ramayana says or describes that Meru Savarni as a mountain, but it's saying the mountain was named Meru because sage Meru Savarni was doing tapascharya in that region, possibly southern Europe or possibly Central Europe. I am reproducing the same geographical map, but this time I have inserted a broad rectangle to show the area that appears to have been described by Sugriv while describing the west direction. Now, there is something that I missed when I was researching this, the geographic point of view. What I did is essentially I followed the descriptions that led to the travel of Vanara party along the land. However, there are specific descriptions to the ocean and actually crossing or traveling through the ocean in the west direction. And this is a specific and very interesting original and unique contribution of one Miss Yamini Joshi from Texas. She brought it to my attention. And once she actually produced the specific evidence, she gave me a lot more evidence, but I'm just quoting key 3 verses from Kishkinda Kanda, where as they are going in the west direction, they are also encountering the ocean, actually ocean possibly twice, like in the line number 10, but also again line number 19. And this remains just a conjecture at that point, but there are many descriptions which seem to match with how they are going. So for example, the first mention of the sea in the western direction could be right here near modern-day Karachi, and possibly the ocean journey is referred to is this journey through the Arabian Sea, what we call Arabian Sea, or what Ramayana calls Sindhu Sagar. But then there is another mention of the ocean, and one wonders if it is referring to crossing through the Mediterranean Sea. Okay, it refers to another Shatayojanam, crossing through the ocean, through the Samudra. What we also know from the geography and oceanography, that the Black Sea that we see today came into being as a saltwater sea only 7,500 years ago, just after the Mahabharata. And so more than likely, it did not exist as a sea at that time. It could have been a much smaller sweetwater lake. Much of the northern portion of Europe, and of course, the North America, but North America is not directly relevant. Much of the northern portion of Europe is covered with glaciers. Norway, Sweden, parts of Germany, and entire United Kingdom, Iceland, Ireland, and parts of northern France, and could be many other areas. They're completely covered under glaciers. And that is the reason I said when the reference to Sage Meru Savarni comes in the context of Europe, more than likely it refers to the southern part of modern day Europe. All right, quickly looking in the north direction. Now, this is the description starting with central India, going all the way to the Arctic Sea. Now, the reason I'm including this is because Arctic Sea is part of the Europe as well. So initially, it describes starting from India, then going towards Mount Kailash. It refers to Manas Sarovar. It refers to Uttara Madra and Uttara Kuru regions. For example, right here, okay, Pasthalan Bharatan Chaivam Kuruncha Saha Madrake. Okay, and then we can identify those regions in our times with respect to the countries that are east of Caspian Sea, such as Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan, northern parts of Afghanistan, and western parts of modern day China. That was Uttara Kuru. But what is interesting is then Sugriv describes the geography all the way to the Arctic Sea. For example, he says, Tam atikramya shailendram uttara payasam nidhi. Okay, that is the Uttara Samudra. And what is interesting, it says that although that place is filled with darkness, now that's not true 100% of the time. That's only true when it's winter there, but winters are long. However, Sugriv describes that although the place is dark, it is shining as if there is a sun. For example, it says, Satu desho vi suryo api tasya bhasa prakashate surya lakshmya abhividneya tapata iva vivastata. And what could be these things that he might be referring to? We can only conjecture. More than likely, he is referring to the northern lights. What is interesting is that in the Mahabharata, when Arjun goes to the northern region, he is also referring in very distinct terms to a phenomenon which can be only compared with northern lights. Again, think of this as a 13th millennium BCE. While he is describing the geography all the way to the Arctic Sea, he's actually asking them not to go anywhere close to it. In fact, he gives them the upper boundary, the northern boundary. He says, Na katham chan gantavyam kurunam uttarenava. Do not go beyond the Uttara Kuru, which is, as I said, the east of Caspian Sea, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and northern parts of Afghanistan, and the western part of China. He says, do not go beyond that point. It's very difficult to go there. And if you go beyond that point, it's even harder to come back. And this perfectly matches with the situation on the ground in 13 millennium BC, where much of the northern portion is completely covered with glaciers. And even when it's not covered with glaciers, the conditions are like tundra or like a near tundra with very little resources for sustenance, extremely cold, inhospitable climates, and Sugriva appears to be aware of them. Namaskar.